Hello and welcome to another great episode of the Optimize Show. I am David Bomano, your host. Every Wednesday morning, a new show for your viewing pleasure. The goal of Optimize is where I just interview great business leaders, and I really try to get some incredible nuggets on how to make your business, your leadership, your culture, your hiring, your retention, everything, your engagement better so that you can optimize it, make it the best it can be. And today I have on the show a great guest to really help us do that, Dr. Dee. Dr. Dee, welcome to the Optimize Show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Happy to be here today.
Very excited. So we'll say your real name once, it's Dr. Dee Kimbrel.
Correct.
But you're just Dr. Dee.
Yeah.
You're like Madonna, right? Just have like this one name, right? I love
Absolutely. Easy to remember.
Lady Gaga. What's your last name? We don't know, right? So actually, you're in good company. I could think, there's Cher, there's Beyonce. I mean, how many people have?
Beyonce.
We just know their first name,
Beyonce,
right? Yeah, we just know their first name. So you're
the
Dr.
Beyonce of DE&I.
I like that. I like
yeah.
that. So that's why you're here, is because you went to RIT, and then you also furthered your education and ultimately got your PhD.
Correct.
Hence the doctor.
Yes.
And but you're here today because you are really focused on helping companies
Absolutely.
get to the next level.
Absolutely.
With DEI strategies, culture, leadership strategies, so that they can be the best they can be.
Absolutely.
So that's true. So tell us a little bit more about Dr. Dee. You spoke at our summit, so thank you for that. I got to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey, about how you got interested in this and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the last 17 or 18 years, I've been working with organizations to kind of solve some of the tough issues that they have around people in the organization. So like you said, from diversity, equity, and inclusion to leadership, to culture, to change, I've worked with organizations in all different industries and fields, from higher education to government, to corporate organizations, to large organizations, and then also to really small organizations as well. And really focus on building that structure and strategy around those different things and ensuring that they are embedded into the culture of the organizations so that they can be impactful. I started off my career in HR, which is, a natural transition, but in HR working at Target. So, working at Target as an HR manager.
Oh, wow. Here locally?
Yeah, here in Rochester, between Victor and Irondequoit.
Okay.
So I managed the HR function for those stores, but I also worked in higher education.
Okay.
So I would teach business courses, communication courses in the evenings. So I really wanted to be able to bring those things together.
Yeah.
So how can I bring that education, that leadership, and then also that people management focus together. So over the years, I was able to do that through a series of positions and jobs. I was able to kind of bring that experience together. Then I wanted to bring that education together.
Yeah.
And that led me to pursue my doctorate in management organizational leadership.
Okay.
And in that process and in those courses, I had those aha moments. So even being in HR, working for several years, I hadn't had the opportunity to really understand concepts around organizational culture, DEI, but I started to have some aha moments. And even in my own experiences where I've lacked DEI, where I've lacked inclusion, the culture wasn't too good, but in the past, I really couldn't advocate for myself because I didn't have the language.
Yeah.
So as I started to become more educated around that, I developed the language and had those aha moments. Well, this is what happened to me, or this is what I was experiencing, or this is what the company was lacking. So when we think about 10 to 15 years ago, organizations really didn't give the expectations, right, around a good culture, around being included, and definitely not the language.
Yeah.
So from that point on, I really wanted to be an advocate for people like me, people who cannot advocate for themselves, and really working with and in organizations to change cultures and make sure that they are places where people can thrive, no matter your background. So that's how I kind of got into the work. Right. And then from there, work with organizations like Paychex and building their strategy from the ground up around diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, and culture, and then working also for our local government as well in building structure and strategy. And for the first time, I was appointed the Chief Diversity Officer. And for the first time, really having some focus locally and then putting that into the local law, that we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, things around access to language services, minority and women-owned business contracting with the government, and things like that that are really in place to kind of change lives. And now I am really, and over the past 10 years, I've kind of done this simultaneously, is work with organizations as a consultant. So a lot of times I'm working with smaller organizations that cannot afford to have a full DEI department, but still need that presence, still need that strategy within their organization. So I work with all organizations across the country, from solar companies to beauty companies to science foundations.
Right.
And so several different things. So that's what I'm doing now, and really enjoying helping companies be intentional around this work.
I like that word, intentional. That's good. This may be a weird question. So in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's at least two groups of people. And so one group is, yes, unfortunately they are just idiots and they are not for, we'll say, diversity, equity, inclusion, right?
Yes.
They're just like,
Yeah.
they don't care about it.
Yeah.
Maybe they're even so stupid that they're against it,
Yeah.
right? There's people like that, right?
Absolutely.
But then there's a group of people that they don't know what they don't know.
Correct.
Right, and they don't mean anything to not include people or not to be, they have diversity, but they just need to be made aware of what some people are going through and some needs that would help them thrive, as you say, thrive.
Yeah.
What group do you think is bigger, and what group do you mostly find yourself working with?
Yeah, and I think when you come into an organization, you're going to have all people, right?
Yeah.
People that agree with it, people that don't, and people that just don't care.
Right.
They don't care,
Yeah.
and especially if it isn't impacting them in any way, or they think that it's not impacting them in any way.
Right.
And the tricky part about it, David, is that you don't know.
Yeah.
You really don't know, because everybody, they may put on that face and say, yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
Right.
But, in actuality, they may not. So it's really hard to know who is who and who's a part of what group unless they are very open about that. So for the most part, I see people engaging with it. So, that is what I see.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be people that don't.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I try to tell organizations that you can't always change the hearts and minds of everybody.
Yeah.
You can't make people care about DEI. It is a personal willingness to do that. However, when they are in the organization, the policies, practices, and procedures that you require to reflect, diversity, equity, and inclusion are the things that you need to implement. So instead of working on changing how everybody feels about it, how in practice can they, can it be implemented?
Right.
So I try to tell organizations to focus on that. You get the most return on your investment when you're focusing on your policies and procedures and what people can do as it relates to mitigating inequities and things of that nature.
Create the framework.
Correct.
Don't leave it up to their what they think they should do. Like maybe sometimes it works, maybe sometimes it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so create some guidelines and a framework.
Absolutely. And when you think about how people are hired, what does that process look like? What does that procedure look like? What are the gaps where inequities can come in and fill those gaps? So people can't, even if that's their mindset, they can't in the workplace implement those thoughts.
Yeah, I like what you said in the beginning there, where some people know what's going on. Some people are kind of watching what's going on but not doing much, and some people don't even know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I always tell people, I feel like life is like a parade. Like 1/3 of people are actually in the parade, 1/3 is they're watching the parade, and the other third doesn't even know a parade's going on, right?
Right.
So you kind of prove my story there, right? So, and I look at myself, like I am somebody who tries to find the good in everybody. I pride myself on trying to love everybody. It doesn't always work, but I give it my best shot. So, I had a great upbringing. I grew up in, moved to Pittsburgh, New York in the middle of the first grade.
Nice.
And that year I believe it was the first year of the urban suburban program, right? So we had all these inner city kids come to my first grade class. There was about, I think, 10 or 12. And they stayed. I mean, they stayed with us until graduation. And you know what happened early on is at first, yes, it was kind of like, oh, these people are different, right? And I'm sure they were thinking like, well, these people are different, right? But after I would say less than a year, they just became intertwined in our class. Like I just remember being a lot of us were friends and we would hang out and do sports together, and it almost was like we both sets of people became colorblind. We were just like, which I thought was wonderful. We're still in touch, and we all come to the reunions and we're hugging and like, oh my God, But but looking back now, what I didn't know was the differences that they came from in the inner city, probably from some poverty, et cetera. And I never really thought about that. I never recognized that. And I wonder if that still happens in the workplace too, where we think and we're trying and we have good intentions, like, oh, it's great, we're colorblind, everything's fine. But we're really not digging deep a little bit and maybe thinking like, both sides, like what are they going through? And how can we adapt for that, right? So,
Absolutely.
And so that's some of the stuff that you make people aware and help people.
Absolutely. And I think it's really hard to be colorblind because in your group of friends, it may not make a difference, but we know in the larger society as a whole, certain things are, based on color, not only color, disability, gender. So all of those different things can determine your access to opportunity, who people feel is worthy, who people feel is good, capable, all of those different things, right? So, it may be a little bit different, and especially in the workplace, because we're all coming from different backgrounds with a common goal, with whatever that is to get the work done. But how we do the work, and what we believe in is going to be different. And I think that it's very important for people to take off. I always say, take off your lens, right? Because in your lens, you can only see, what you can see, and consider other people's lens, the background that they may come from. And we may not know it all, but have an open mind to know that these differences do exist, right? Sometimes when people haven't seen something, they don't think that it exists, right? Just because you haven't seen it, you haven't experienced it, doesn't mean it isn't there. So be open-minded enough to know that differences do exist. The way that people live, it does exist. And, kind of stepping outside of your own bubble, your own box, to realize that there's several different realities.
Right. Now that's powerful. I think about some of the strides that we made, right? And so I think locally here in Rochester, back in the 80s and 90s, Xerox was really striving to be, to the forefront of a lot of this. Some of my friends' fathers were managers there, and there was a book, In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters, and they were talking about some of the cutting edge things that Xerox was doing. And then I believe when they made Ursula the CEO, she was the first African American woman to be CEO of a Fortune 500 company, right? So right here in Rochester, New York. So we can be proud of that, right?
Absolutely.
How since the 80s and 90s, how are we doing? I mean, we're getting better? We're getting worse? The same? I mean,
well, David, that is a great question, and we had, especially with our larger organizations, Xerox, Kodak, they really had some leaders of color that were implementing some change in our community, bringing some awareness around our differences. There's one organization that I was a part of, the Diversity Workforce Network, that had grown outside of those partnerships back in those times. So there are still things being done. I would say in Rochester, we don't have those strong community connections with corporate organizations like we used to. I don't think it's that strong, and I don't think that they're moving initiatives as a community like we did back then. Some of those organizations have since folded, and so they're not doing a lot of that awareness and that community work that they were doing then. Not to say that it's not going on, but I would say pre-2020, you kind of see things kind of falling by the wayside. But after the George Floyd murders, as you know, a lot of that awareness around that has started. So, over the past 3 years, we kind of see a lot of organizations, some jumping on the bandwagon, right? Some jumping on the bandwagon, some being very serious about that. and some really committing to their DEI initiatives. Over the last year, you start to see some of those things kind of dwindle, and now you start to understand who was on the bandwagon, who was doing it because it was trending, and who's really committed to it. So I think that's where we are now. We see some big companies committing to DEI, but we also see a lot of the outcomes of that, burst of energy around it. We see organizations cutting funding, chief diversity officers losing positions, people becoming burnt out, and then a lot of people or a lot of practitioners in the field realizing that organizations may not be as ready or as serious or committed to investing the dollars, the accountability, the transparency that it needs to really ingrain diversity, equity, and inclusion into an organization.
Great. So a lot of people watching the show, they're not owners or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, right? I mean, we're helping some big companies, of course, but a lot of small and medium-sized companies that may not have the budget to hire, a DEI officer, right? So somebody who truly wants to commit and start that ripple and make a difference. What are some strategies that you would recommend that they can say, you know what, I could take these 3 or 5 things and I could start doing them like today?
Yeah. Well, we see a lot of organizations, especially some of our smaller organizations, wanting to move forward with that, and they start committees. Committees are great. Have a group of people of diverse backgrounds that are committed to DEI get together, but it's also important to hire a professional, right? So making sure that you are hiring a consultant to kind of guide you along the way, and making sure that you are doing the right thing and it's impactful, and you're not adding to the harm that can be caused, or the trauma or what have you, that can be caused when there is a lack of DEI. So I think forming a committee, engaging with a consultant, knowing that it's not going to be a quick, easy fix, right? It's a journey. It is something, an organization has to be committed to long term. Awareness is key. So start with educating, making sure you're having those educational resources, and then looking at your policies and your procedures in the way in which things are done, and being able to find those gaps of inequities and fill those with equitable practices.
Excellent. So looking back from the 80s, and before, what was it? I think we talked before, it was called affirmative action.
Affirmative action, yeah,
right. Yeah, and that was kind of like starting things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, with affirmative action, it was really about saying, okay, it was about the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys need to have some people of color here, you need to have black people, you need to have some Hispanic people, but it didn't value. So people would say, well, you just got this job because of affirmative action. We needed someone that looked like you. Right. Not saying you had the tools, the resources, the education, or the experience to be effective. Yeah. You're just here because we have to have you. So that was the culture, right? And as you know, that doesn't make people feel comfortable. They don't feel included, and it's really not set up for them to thrive.
It's probably not the best thing for the person either.
Right, absolutely.
Like, they want to know that they got hired because they were like the best person for the job. Yeah. Not because of the other reason, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that's where we started, and like you said, that was a start to having more diversity, but it just wasn't, and still isn't enough. And as I think it evolved to just diversity. Okay, we need to have different people. Oh, now people need to feel included in that environment. And then we also need to make sure that it's equitable, making sure everybody has what they need in order to thrive based on who they are and their differences.
Yeah, very good. So, it's funny because the doctor that delivered my kids, she was African American. But I never describe her as I just describe her as like this great doctor who we loved. Yeah. And made the experience so special for us. And so I think that's, we start with affirmative action. I think that's, if all of the outcomes could be like that, it was just the best person did this job, and just happened to be Latino, African American, Italian, white, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
That's the goal. And we want to get to where we won't have to say it's a black doctor, like, it's something different, it's something unique, or, So I think that's where we want to get. You wouldn't describe the doctor as, it was the Polish doctor. Like, you probably wouldn't say that. Right. And we still have a lot of firsts. The first African American person to do this, the first Latino person to do this. So, we're getting there, but we won't get there until it's a point where, we're just people. Right. We're just all people.
Yeah, so. And you're doing your part.
Yeah.
You're doing your part. Excellent. Well, thanks for doing what you're doing. You're making an impact here in Rochester and beyond. So appreciate all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
If people are like, you know what, I want to learn more. I want to reach out to Dr. D.
Yeah.
I just love saying that. It sounds like a superhero. Dr. D's coming to save the day.
Dr. D's on the way.
Dr. D's on the way. How can they learn more about you and reach out to you?
Yeah, so learning more about me, my website is Kimbrel Management Consulting Co. Hold on.
Yeah.
KimbrelConsultingCO.com.
Yep.
KimbrelConsultingCO.com is the website. You can find information, but you can also contact me. And then also LinkedIn. Very big on LinkedIn. They can find me. It's Dr. D.
Dr. D and DEE, everybody.
DEE.
So DEE.
Yep.
And just if we're going to spell your last name, Kimbrel.
Correct.
So that we have that there. But and always just reach out to me too. Be happy to make a personal connection. I have her email. I actually have her cell phone now.
Yes.
So yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. D.
Absolutely.
Pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you
for having
continued massive success.
Thank you. You too.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Another great episode of the Optimize Show. Like I said, every Wednesday morning, a brand new episode. Thank you so much. Make sure to have a great day, and don't forget to stay awesome.